Hi everyone, I'm Jacques raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well now that the World Cup 2022 has finished, and what an incredible final, best that I can recall from my lifetime. I wanted to do a literary World Cup for the knockout stages. 15 nations played and were eliminated across the past couple weeks. I wanted to see if I could identify a particular writer, a particular novel that I really enjoy from each of those nations. So let's dive in, but as we do, I want to do a quick VAR review from my Literary World Cup group stage, in which I said I couldn't remember any Serbian writers I'd read. And that was not true, because Milorad Pavić was Serbian, and his book, Dictionary of the Khazars, is incredible. It is an unconventional novel, it's experimental, it's a lexicon novel in which he has three different dictionaries going over the same series of events, and you get to read three different perspectives around what's happening. A nice little Rashomon effect, but this is a fantastic book. I cannot recommend it highly enough, so wanted to add this in from last week's video. But as we dive in now, let's start at the back, as always, with our goalkeeper, and that is going to be a writer from Switzerland, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, particularly his Confessions, I think more so than The Social Contract, in part because Rousseau is an expansive presence. I could see he could fill up the goal with his words, if not entirely his ideas. The other thing is that Rousseau, particularly in the Confessions, is so focused on himself that I can't see him passing the ball to anybody very well. So I can't put him anywhere else in the outfield. But the Confessions are a very strong book, and I think there's plenty to appreciate in those pages. Now we're gonna move forward into defense, and at right back, we've got Federico Garcia Lorca from Spain, one of my favorite poets. I think he's a poet who has a couple of different styles. His lyrical quality is very strong, but he was also a great playwright. And we're putting him at right back because he wrote Blood Wedding. It's great. That said, I think the most recent work of his that I've read, other than Blood Wedding, would be his poems, the Gypsy Ballads, which are great poems. So I did a video on those about 2 years ago. I'll link that in the description box. But we will continue and move into our center backs, and one of those is going to be Olga Tokarczuk, a great Polish writer. She's won a Nobel Prize. Most recently, I read the books of Jacob, but the book of hers that I would recommend would not be that enormous 970-page, masterpiece. It would rather be Flights. Flights is, again, unconventional. There's this sort of intersection between what feel like almost a short story cycle, almost essays in there. There's a lot of different forms of writing, but with Flights, center back, she'd get up tall, real tall. So that's why she's going to be back there. Great writer. I think one of the more interesting writers currently living and working right now. My other center back is going to be the great Senegalese writer, Ousmane Sembène. Great writer, artist, filmmaker, just can do everything. And I would recommend, if you want a shorter work of his, I would recommend Xala. And with that work in particular, I would say he's got to be as far away from trying to score a goal as possible. That's all I'll say. My other defender is going to be representing France, and that is going to be the great Frantz Fanon, who was born in a French department in Martinique in the West Indies. And he is an incendiary writer. That's why he's going to be played left back. And we've got him on the left side, because that's which side he's on, if you've read any of his works. His essays are incredible. They are very provocative, but they are also just incredibly thorough and astute and very perceptive. He really pushed this idea of the colonization of the consciousness, and has just an incredibly vital perspective, even now in the 21st century, 60-something years after he died. But his essay on violence might be a reason he's at left back. And that is, of course, the answer every time someone says, oh, you chose violence today. You've been reading your Fanon. Moving forward into midfield, we've got a couple of, pretty cool writers from Morocco, and what an incredible tournament they had. It's just absolute joy. I'm going to go with Laila Lalami. And the only work of hers that I've read is Secret Sun. But it's very good, and you could probably find that at your library, or one of her novels at your library. She is currently writing, currently working, and so she's got a fun voice. It's realistic, and yet the perspectives she provides are so unique and so wonderful. My other midfielder will be Jang Jung-il from South Korea. And I'm hoping that in the near future, I've read another South Korean writer that I appreciate more, because I wasn't the biggest fan of When Adam Opens His Eyes. I read that about a year ago, and I'll link that video in the description box. But we're going to just stick him in midfield and hope that he doesn't get yellow cards within about 7 minutes, because the way he writes in When Adam Opens His Eyes suggests that he totally could. It's a very dark, vicious, transgressive book. So perhaps he's a defensive midfielder. That said, my final midfielder is going to be the wonderful Fernando Pessoa, who could just do everything. His poetry, the various heteronyms he created for himself, suggests he could be playing in the back, he could play the way forward, he could be anywhere on the field, because he can cast himself into all of these different voices. The various poetic voices he has, some feel like sailors, some feel like these almost like epic poets, others feel very focused on like romanticism. It's incredible what he's capable of. And so his poetry, and I've got a volume that sort of from Penguin Classics that collects a bunch of poetry, is incredible. I know there's a lot of fans of the Book of Disquiet. I will say though, I prefer his poetry, and it's masterful, and it's incredible that he casts these different character voices for himself and just embodies them in so many wonderful ways. So he's going to be there to truly just run riot. Up forward from Japan, there are so many wonderful choices, but I'm going to go with one I've read more recently, and that is going to be Yuko Tsushima. I read her book Territory of Light, and I really was impressed by it. The way that it was, it seemed quiet and unassuming, and yet was incredibly impactful, incredibly powerful. And there's a very clear artifice and skill and technique to her writing, to the perspective she wants to bring, to the metaphors she waits to employ. She doesn't just dump all of them out right away the way that some other writers would. She really is precise in saying, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it at this point in the story or in the novel, because it's going to really land properly there. And so who better to make the right cross in, okay? Up forward as well, we're going to have, from Brazil, the great Machado de Assis. His posthumous memoirs of a dead man suggest that he could have written a work called The Pre-Match Memoirs of a Second Striker. And the humor, the vivacity he provides, I want him on the field. I want to see what he's going to do. I want to see what he can recreate from the page to the pitch, because he is an absolute delight. He was postmodern before there was any modernism to be post about. Who knows what he could conjure up, the moments of wonder. So I cannot recommend that book highly enough. Then I will also have, finally, my final starter would be from the Netherlands, and that is going to have to be Anne Frank. Her diary remains one of the great works of the 20th century, one of the most tragic works of the 20th century, the way that she embodies the human spirit in the crucible of horror during the Holocaust, and the way that she and her family continue to believe in their dignity and believe in their humanity, and to believe that there is a spark for a greater future for humanity is incredible. It is one of the most vital works I've ever read. And so, she would deserve to be on the pitch. For my substitution, I will add, I'm going to go with Australia's Peter Carey and the True History of the Kelly Gang. That's sort of one of those, it was on a list some years ago about like the modern 21st century classics. And it's very strong. It's quite humorous, and I think it's Carey's strongest work. I know there are some folks out there who really love Oscar and Lucinda. There's a handful of folks out there who really love like Illywacker or something. But I would say True History of the Kelly Gang is where he really produced something that felt his own and more of a piece with his region, with his home, than maybe his other works had. And then as my coach, as my manager, I'm going with the great David Peace from England, and he will be he'll be channeling hopefully a little more of the Shankly from Red or Dead, rather than the great Brian Clough from the Damned United. One of my favorite books, just a wild first-person perspective tale. Can't recommend, again, that book highly enough. But those will be my recommendations for the Literary World Cup from the knockout stages. Let me know your own. And I'll add, if you wanted a more recent writer from the Netherlands, someone who was writing, you know, in the aftermath of World War II, one that my grandfather did read was Harry Mulisch, and his work is The Discovery of Heaven. It's a big book. And so if you're looking for like modern Dutch fiction, he would be a great choice. And I'll, of course, list all these in the description notes. Let me know what your own recommendations would be. The one I have not mentioned, other than USA, which I did a whole video on, is Croatia, because unlike Serbia, I went through, I don't actually think I've ever read anything from Croatia, so I'd love a recommendation from Croatia. I know that Tobin provided one in the last video, so there's hopefully some Croatian reading in my future. But again, I hope everybody's having a wonderful week, and I love Argentine literature. There will be a full video coming hopefully sometime this week. I've got some books already set out for that. Have a great one, everybody. Thank you.